Beautiful. And then the last administrative thing is that we have reserved space, thanks to Justin, at the Somerville Public Library for upcoming hybrid meetings. So this meeting and October will still be fully remote, so just over Zoom. But then starting in November, we'll also have an in-person option. So that'll be at the central branch of the Somerville Public Library, the one on Highland Ave, just in their auditorium. It's not mandatory to join in person. You can still join via Zoom. We'll have video conferencing set up basically, but if you would like the in-person option, that is available. And I'll include more details on that with the next agenda. Okay, moving on to subcommittee updates. I'm assuming that engineering and evaluation doesn't have any more updates beyond the Tough Street reconstruction that you guys talked about last time.
Yep, that's correct.
Cool. Did policy and enforcement meet this month?
We were attempting to schedule a meeting, but Meredith could not join last night, and Christopher had a household emergency that had to be tended to, so no, we did not meet.
Got it. Totally
fine. There are only 3 of us on that committee, so would you put out an email to the whole group to see if we can recruit some more members, because we need them badly?
You know, Ginny, I hate to say it, but I think every subcommittee needs members badly. So I think the broad goal is that we are working very hard to just recruit more members in general to PTAC. But duly noted.
Okay, that works. I mean, I was just thinking that perhaps if we put out a general call for members, we might be able to improve this a bit.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And then just briefly on education and engagement, Ted, do you want to give an update here?
Yeah, sure. So we met, we met, but also we tabled at an event last weekend at the Summer Streets event on Highland Avenue. Got some good engagement. It wasn't quite as crowded as the Carnival event or as we're expecting the October Summer Streets event on Somerville Avenue to be, but it was good. We talked to some people, handed out some cards, and that was a good event. And then we also did the walk on Tough Street that was just mentioned on August 31st, I believe. That was really a great success. We got to talk to a bunch of people who live in the neighborhood, including people who kind of joined along the way. And as already came up, Harriet and Holly from the Commission on Persons with Disabilities were there, as well as Tom Lamar from the Bike Committee and Viola Augustine from the city. So really good walk. And I have some notes that I am almost finished typing up and we'll send around to the whole committee soon. So I didn't quite make that in time for today's meeting. And then October 22nd, I believe. 24th. Sorry, I getting dates wrong. No, it's the 24th is Tuesday. The walk in Glen. No, sorry, I was thinking about the Summer Streets event.
Then you're totally right. I'm so sorry. So
22nd, Somerville Avenue, Monster Mash. We're gonna have a table there with mobility again. Zach, Alessandra, and I are gonna be staffing the table. If anyone else wants to join, please let me or Alessandra know. And we can also, it'd be great if any of you are coming to the event and want to stop by and hang out a bit. Great to see you all. And then, sorry, I'll let you, Alessandra, explain the event on the 24th too.
Yeah, so sorry. So on the 24th, we are working with Neighborways and Culture House, both organizations who just won a really exciting grant to support the city's community engagement around the Glen Street Neighborway, which I believe just became expanded to the Glen Street and Otis Street Neighborway. So we have to check in about the walk to see if that'll be expanded as well. But we're planning a walk similar to the walk that we just hosted on Tough Street with both of those organizations to generate additional feedback on those designs, which will happen on a quicker timeline than the Tough Street reconstruction, but we'll all be in the same same area. And we should have some more information on that project presented later tonight. I think that's it.
Alessandra, this is Jenny.
Mhm.
Are we planning to attend the Civic Day event later this month?
That is not the plan, although I did see it and wanted to make a note of it for next year because I think it would be so awesome if PTAC and other committees could participate in that. But for this year, no. So let's move on to our main event for the evening, which is the focus on the Tufts Street reconstruction. And then that'll follow with kind of a broader context of the Tufts Street project area, because a fair amount of work has been done in that area in recent years. And obviously with the temporary closing of the Winter Hill School and the rerouting of students to the Edgerly and Capuano, there's obviously a lot of interest in pedestrian and mobility safety in that area. So I'm going to hand it over to mobility to take it from here.
All right, we just have a couple slides because we thought, most of the discussion could be, amongst yourselves about Tufts Street and any potential feedback. So you guys can see my screen now. Okay, great. So Tufts Street, that is a project that's a part of our resurfacing program. So not a quick build project, but also not a complete ground up reconstruction, sort of the in-between one. I put the project website on this slide. It's somervillema.gov/Tufts Street. So things that are included: new pavement, new sidewalks, resetting all the curbs, tree plantings, improved crosswalks, things that we want to talk about with the community about whether we want to include them, expanding landscaping zones, different traffic calming treatments, should there be new crosswalks, should there be new bicycle treatments, parking regulation changes, widening of sidewalks, things of that nature. But then, what's not really included is major utility work, street lighting, green stormwater infrastructure, redesigning traffic signals, or adding them, and sort of street network changes. And the limit of work is Tufts Street. It's a pretty short street across to Washington. We're including the full cross street intersection, but this project doesn't include improvements on Washington itself. Folks may recall there is a project plan sort of as part of the GLX mitigation to do some improvements on Washington Street, so that's a little bit separate. The timeline of the project, so started over the summer and fall. There was a public meeting at the end of August where some conceptual options were presented. There's going to be another public meeting on October 11th, next month, to present sort of the final concept and collect more feedback. And then we're going to take that concept, bring it to 100% design, and potentially actually start construction in the second half of next year. So again, public meeting 2 is on Wednesday, October 11th. I put a link in the slides here to the register for that meeting. And then there's a ton more information. It didn't really feel like we could do it justice in a couple minutes here, about the meeting that just happened and all the different options that were presented. You can head to the project website if you want to see more info about that. And so we have some pictures here of the team meeting with constituents. We had a little pop-up on Tufts Street, and on the right is Kate and Adam at the table. So what else is going on in the neighborhood? Glen Street Neighborway, which Alessandra just touched on. So we're partnering with Culture House and Neighborways Design to do a quick build neighborway. And I probably should have mentioned Tufts Street is a neighborway on the bicycle network plan. So it's one of those lower traffic streets that we're really hoping to make very nice for biking and for walking, without sort of specific infrastructure like separated bike lanes, but more of like a traffic calm slow street. And Glen Street is another one of those neighborways. And this is a quick build project where we're partnering with those groups to implement something on Glen Street. And it's actually funded by the city of Somerville through an ARPA grant. Community engagement is happening now, and there's a link to the project page. And then this is another one that we're hoping to install by the end of June next year. Another big thing in the neighborhood is the relocation of the Winter Hill School to the Edgerly Education Center. Mobility staff, primarily Director Brad and Greg Hannafin, have been working, throughout the summer and fall on all the mobility aspects of that. As a part of that, we did our Clear Corners initiative, sort of the restricting parking close to intersections and crosswalks all along Cross Street and around the school. Added some new bike racks at Edgerly. There's some online resources with a link on this slide to help with wayfinding for folks that are coming to a new area of the city that they haven't come to before. There's been a lot of work on the curb regulations around the school to try and make things a little less hectic and make sure folks are, dropping off their kids on the sidewalk and not in the street. New accessible spaces were added. We've been working with massed out contractors to make sure that they are completing their work around the school. And then also a lot of the work that I'll just talk about in a minute.
Oh, Justin, I think your audio just cut out.
It did.
Maybe he cut out entirely.
Over to the new school. Oh,
Justin, can you repeat maybe that last part because your audio briefly cut out?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay. The last part was a shuttle service that is actually going from the old school site to the new school site that we helped coordinate. And then the next project in the neighborhood is the Pearl Street resurfacing project, and we call it Pearl plus 6 because there were also 6 scattered intersections included. That work is pretty much complete. So new raised intersection at on Cross Street at Gilman Oliver, new raised crosswalk at Everett Ave on Cross Street, and that's directly across from the East Somerville Community School. Traffic circle at Oliver and Glen, so that'll be on the quick build neighborway. And then there's also some raised crosswalks on Oliver Street at Franklin Street, and those 4 together are all along one of the city's existing neighborways, the sort of Glen Street, Oliver Street neighborway. And then the last one, which actually happened earlier, was a crosswalk on Temple Street at Heath Street. And there's still one more intersection to go. It is a new raised crosswalk on Walnut Street. This is just north of the community path, sort of connecting Gilman Street with Ed Leathers Park. And as a part of that, there's going to be a little 2-way bike lane to connect folks from the neighborway actually up to the community path. And we're holding off on that because of the Medford Street detour. So there's a lot more traffic right now using Walnut, and it's just a little too difficult for the contractors to get in there right now. So with any luck, in a couple of weeks, we will be done with that detour, and then they can start that work. So still planning to complete that this year. And then, Pearl Street itself, sorry, this is actually an image over on Cross Street of the raised crosswalk, but Pearl Street was the big resurfacing project, and that's also pretty much complete. So from McGrath to Mount Vernon Street, there's renewed sidewalks, the repaved roadway, there's some speed humps, there's even more raised crosswalks, and most of the pavement markings are in. And then there's a couple punch list items still remaining, like some pavement markings, some signage, some flexi pave around tree pits. So this is like an asphalt that lets water go through it on the sidewalk. But for the most part, that project is complete. And these are just 2 more photos of the raised crosswalk at Oliver Street and Franklin Street, Glen Street at Oliver. So all in all, really a ton of very high quality traffic coming in East Somerville, which is extremely exciting. And then the last thing I'll just throw in before I throw it back to you guys is just want to make a quick plug for our bike and ped counts. Should have gotten an email from Greg about potentially volunteering to go stand out at an intersection and count bikes and peds. There's a link in the slides to sign up. We're hoping to have that happen for the most part over the next 2 weeks. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of these projects, or I can turn it over to you guys to talk about Tough Street. We also have Kate White, who's on the project team for Tough Street, here with us to answer any questions that come up. And, we're happy to dive into more of the details of Tough Street, as needed.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself, Kate, because you were a panelist, you weren't a guest, you weren't on my roll call list. Anyway, very glad you're here. Maybe it makes sense to first hear from the Engineering and Evaluation Committee on Tough Street feedback, just because you guys spent your last subcommittee meeting focusing on it.
Yeah, we can do that. I have a couple of notes. Although we hadn't met after the latest designs were shown, so maybe it would be helpful to kind of go through those first. The city wants to present them, and then we'll bring up comments and questions.
Yeah, I can bring that up. Just stand by one moment.
Yeah, and Zach, can you just clarify, are you saying you met after or before the public meeting?
Before.
Okay.
So in August beforehand.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we were wondering about is the 90 bus. Looks like it currently goes one way down Tough Street. I think that in the update I saw, you guys had said that traffic changes were not on the table, but we had talked about possibilities of making it one way in the direction the bus goes, or if the bus routes still need to go on Tough Street with the bus network redesign.
Kate, are you able to speak to that at all?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, would you mind clarifying the question? Are you asking if a one way in the street is still on the table?
Yeah, so I'm asking if a one-way street is still on the table, and also if the designs, like the designs that you guys have are taking into account the bus that's currently running on Tough Street, and also if you have talked to or heard from the MBTA about whether that route still makes sense, or if it does, maybe adding a stop on Tough Street. So that was, sorry, that was multiple questions.
That is totally fine. I'm just writing them down so I don't forget to answer them. So maybe I'll speak to the first one, which is one way still on the table. What we shared at the public meeting is that we are not considering a network design. Tough Street and there are only two streets off of Washington Street, and I'm going to mix up my M's for a moment, but that enter East Somerville off of Washington Street. And so we would have to rethink many of the streets around if we were going to take into account one waying the street, especially in the direction that the bus now travels. With neighborways, we feel confident that we can still have two-way travel. And using lots of traffic calming and some of the proposed conceptual options that we shared, that we can really kind of meet some of the goals without having to one-way the street at this time. Okay, so the second question, are the designs taking into account the bus currently running on this street? Yes, we are. With the 90 running about approximately, I think its headways are supposed to be 40, correct? But at times it can run over 90 minutes. And it only going in one direction. We feel that it will still work and still have a neighbor way. But in terms of how we talk to the MTA about if this route still, oh, sorry, but to your question around would that then warrant a bus stop? Right now, there is not a bus stop on the route. And actually, Lauren, would it be okay if I call on you to talk a little bit more about our discussions with the MBTA about this route?
Yeah, so we had an initial discussion with the MBTA sort of sharing this plans and the vision of a neighborway here on Tough Street. And so they are looking at this route as well as the long-term vision. It's adjacent to McGrath, and in the long run, with the grounding of McGrath, the idea would be that this bus would run there and sort of be diverted off of Tough Street. And so I think we're just having some initial discussions of what makes sense in the short term. And I'll say, I think you're the first person who's brought up the bus stop. So we'll add that to our discussions going forward of if that would be a possibility. But in the long run, it really is getting it onto the grounding of McGrath and sort of having this be sort of a full scale neighborway without the bus.
Cool. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Alessandra.
No, I was just gonna continue the discussion. So please.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can sort of do justice to what happened at the meeting, but I think in general there were two options presented, and you guys should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, and if you want, Justin, I'm happy to.
Yeah, that'd be
That's
great.
helpful.
Thank you.
So at the meeting on August 30th, along with sharing lots of kind of, existing conditions of the street, we looked at two concepts to share with folks and see what were their initial reactions. We named them mid-block moments and meandering opportunities. And I'll describe each one. With mid-block moments, this is looking at, right now, Tufts currently is quite a straight street. And so taking what is the existing condition and looking at a succession of two or more areas with narrow road widths to create opportunities for safer crossings, wider sidewalks. And if you could show the next slide, Justin, you can see here this was looking at about 9.5 feet on each side for travel lanes, with about 10.5 feet for sidewalk, with a total of a combined 21 feet, and would use what we call more vertical options to traffic to calm traffic, such as speed humps. And then when we really pinch the street, where we have those kind of mid-block moments, if you show the next slide, Justin, we could really look at anywhere from about 14 feet on each side with sidewalk, and really narrow that lane down to about 12 feet and create what we call more where cars would have to wait for one another to pass, but bikes could still pass safely through. And we've showed some illustrative options on photos and in illustration as well right here. But really you can put in, there could be a lot more greenery, you can put in more landscaping zones. And then in meandering opportunities, instead of kind of taking what we call like more vertical options for calming the traffic, we would look at more horizontal options. And this is where you would kind of chicane the street to kind of stop cars from barreling through. And this would allow us to have larger areas of widened sidewalk. So Justin, if you show the next slide, we show an illustration on the right that takes what is a street that has, 2 lanes of parked cars on either side, and then kind of painted chicanes that make the vehicle have to veer right, then veer left. And this would create what we call a yield condition. So Justin, thank you. You would have about 12 feet width travel lanes. And we would have dedicated pullover areas for people driving and biking to allow that yielding when people are traveling up and down the street. This really allows you to have much wider sidewalks, and in there you could have much more space for trees, more greenery, or just more places to be, as we've heard a lot about narrow sidewalks on the street. So we put out these 2 concept options. And if folks are interested, we've also got a little poll on our site just to kind of gather feedback in lots of different ways. So hearing from folks on the street with these proposing these 2 ideas, having the poll online, as well as having one-on-one meetings. And so those are the two concepts we showed. And we kind of asked folks as well about, what are their desired curb uses, where are some locations for where are desired locations for crosswalk, as right now we only have crosswalks across Tufts when it meets Cross Street and at Washington Street. So maybe I can pause there on describing the options and see if there are any questions or comments.
Is
Okay,
it
this
fair
is-
to sorry, is it fair to say that after all this these improvements, the feeling of the street will be similar to Cedar Street? Because at least in my mind, I'm trying to imagine how it's going to look like. And what I'm imagining is a narrow street with a two-way road and thinner sidewalks, and a very the feeling that when you go there is just very busy, very transit oriented, car oriented type of road, as opposed to something that is more calm like you showed in the pictures. Just because the road is quite narrow, so if you're gonna do bike lanes and 2 lanes of cars, I don't know how can you put all of them at the same time there.
Thanks, Vitor, for your question. So we actually are with our neighborways, our streets designated as neighborways, we don't plan on having separated bike lanes. Our aim with these streets are to really lower our vehicle volumes, really slow traffic, and actually I can pull up the specific slide of the kind of like, so yeah, if you go to slide 32, Justin, we want to design these to have fewer cars and to make them slower. And then, to give you some kind of thresholds we're looking at is we want to have less than 20-mile-per-hour speeds, like less than a total of 2,000 vehicle or daily number of vehicles. And then peak hours, you really want it to be less than 50 vehicles. And so really folks can share the whole space. If you're biking, you can take the whole lane similar to a vehicle. And in both the concept options, we're actually hoping to widen the sidewalks overall, especially from the existing condition, which is definitely quite narrow on one side.
Yeah, so Vito, there's an opportunity for much wider sidewalks than Cedar, and also a lot lower traffic. So this slide has like where we are today, and then the brackets are where we want to be. So we're actually pretty close to meeting the requirements for a neighborway.
Yeah, and I forgot to back to your question around if it feels similar to Cedar Street. Cedar Street, even though it has chicanes, which is maybe like what's making you have that connection, or that's where I'm kind of connecting it to. In our meandering opportunities concept, this would be a yield condition along the whole stretch except for the pullover spaces. So you would never have two full lanes.
Oh, I
There
see.
wouldn't be enough room. It would be like some of our more narrow residential streets where one car has to pull over into like the parking lane.
But it would accept the two-way for cars, but it's only one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Does that work with the new? I know that you are not considering the new bus redesign, but there are 2 routes going there, the 85 and 90. One is 20 minutes, the other one is 30 minutes. So there's going to be 3 or 4 or 3 buses every hour passing by.
it's just the 90.
But in the Vitor's speaking to the bus network redesign.
Yeah, so the
Oh,
new
right.
design has the 85 as well, and they changed the time. So I'm assuming there's going to be high utilization for the bus, but only going south. So it's just one way, right? Because the bus doesn't need to go north from there. So that's what I think we discussed a lot in the engineering subcommittee is that an opportunity to make just a one-way road where there is a priority for a given, because the bus is going to use this street, is going to have a priority for the bus. And then of course we need to adjust, the rest of the neighborhood to, make sense of this one-way road. But I think that was what we thought about. It's just like making a narrow lane, just one way, and keep the 2 bike lanes in place, maybe expand the sidewalks so they're not so narrow. Yeah, sorry.
Just to flag for you guys, if we keep the bike lanes, it's really hard. I think it becomes really hard to narrow the street. And I don't think, I mean, Kate, you can maybe speak more to the one way, but I'm not sure that's something we're considering right now.
My apologies. So with your question around like in the future with bus network redesign, as kind of Lauren mentioned in our dialogue with the MBTA, we are trying to work with them and kind of think through some of these changes kind of aligning with the grounding of McGrath Highway. And so are there opportunities in there? And, you know, that work was kind of going on as we were developing our bicycle network plan and really saw Tufts, especially as like a gateway to East Somerville. In general, it's kind of like feel is very residential, of being kind of ideal for a neighborway, especially as it connects to other neighborhoods that reach our schools. So in terms of the one-waying, we aren't considering at this time. And I think as MBTA moves towards implementing bus network redesign, then we'll have a better idea of like what are some of the options. But at this time, we're going to build it to being a really safe, you know, prioritizing folks walking and rolling and biking.
So this is Ted. Just if I could add 2 things on the one-way idea. I know Viola had said at the walk when we did the walk on Top Street that there would not actually be any sort of width advantage to having a one-way because the 12-foot wide travel lane that's imagined for the yield street is actually the same width that it would be for a one-way street. So anyway, she said there was no kind of advantage to that from that perspective. There were, I mean, several, I think there were something like 6 or 7 residents of the area who joined the walk, and we asked them about the one-way idea because one of them had brought it up, and they were all, I think all of them were supportive of the idea of having it as a one-way from the perspective of people who live on that street and drive there. So just for what that's worth, it might be something that is worth, you know, asking people about and seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. I'm keeping track of all the comments too. So from looking away is just because I'm typing questions and comments that you all are sharing with me. So thank you.
Ted, would you be open to sharing maybe some of the other comments that we got on the walk, feedback on Tufts Street?
Yeah, sure. So we got, let me just pull that up. So yeah, I mean the overwhelming thing that we heard was just that cars drive very fast on Tufts Street, and there's a lot of support for any changes that would make that less likely, which I think all of these options would. And I think everyone or almost everyone who came to the walk had been to the public meeting and seen the options before. And we, you know, while we were walking, we saw cars just driving extremely fast. So that was, and the street clearly kind of invites that right now. So that's definitely the kind of overwhelming concern I think that people had. Yeah, and so though, and I think people mentioned about the one, I'm looking at my notes here, about the one-way issue is that, you know, they think that people were thinking that that would reduce overall traffic volume and that would be an improvement without making it unduly difficult to actually get around by car there, as from their perspective as people who drive there. I think there was more support. I mean, several people specifically like the meandering street concept as opposed to or you know, preferred that to the other one that was presented. And then we got a bunch of comments. So Harriet, who's a member of the commission for people with disabilities, came and so demonstrated, and she's blind, and she demonstrated walking with a cane, and had a lot of comments about the tactile strips at the intersections and how they needed to be aligned. And I think a lot of that feedback she provided directly to Viola. And then there was one thing which actually is in one of the pictures that that were on the slide just there, is that there's a place on Washington Street at the end of Tufts Street where there's a kind of an urgent safety concern with a car had crashed into the fence that kind of is along the sidewalk there, and so there's a dangerous drop off that was not very well marked, especially for people who would not be able to see. And there were some comments about that, as well as the crosswalks on Washington Street, which I've noticed, having been there more recently than the walk, have been painted, which is great to see. But I think those are the main comments that I have notes on. Alessandra, were there other things that you remember people bringing up?
I think that is a really good encapsulation of all of it. I think there were a few residents who were like expressing skepticism with additional speed humps, but I think that my sense is that that was mostly because there have been so many speed humps going in Somerville so far. I think their exact words were like, it seems like speed humps are just going in willy-nilly around Somerville, which I mean, I personally remember the presentation in January where the speed reduction was just so impressive with the speed hump. So it seems a little more than willy-nilly to me, but that was the comment that was reflected. And then there was another comment on, skepticism around loading zones. From the perspective of like whether there would actually be adherence to them or whether we would still see illegal parking behavior even with the loading zones implemented. But I think other than that, Ted, everything you said was a good summary.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Are there others who have either comments on Tufts Street or questions about the designs or anything else happening in the area right now?
This is Ted. I did have one question for you, Kate. Did you say that there would be parking on both sides of the street in what?
Oh no, I was describing one of the photo examples,
Okay.
just to kind of illustrate for everyone. With the width of the street, we do not have that much width to allow for parking on both sides and that same yield condition. But with the pullover space, there are opportunities for kind of looking at different curbside regulations, and so that's definitely on the table with the neighbor waste design. But
Great,
not
thanks.
on both sides. And Justin, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, even prior, there was only parking on one side, I think prior to 2018, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So if we make it so narrow that two cars can't pass, then we need to provide some sort of pullover space. Is that long-term parking? Is it accessible parking? Is it loading? I mean, those are the questions that we're trying to answer right now.
Yeah, and one thing that I know Viola would mention if she was here is that when we're looking at different curbside options, it's kind of weighing like, okay, do we have a narrow, not narrow to now, but like where we have the opportunities to make it a wider sidewalk. When we're using that space for vehicles, we don't have that option as much to expand it out or add in more greenery. So those are the things we're trying to kind of gather from folks, or what are the priorities, so we can kind of begin to like, have that inform the design.
Yeah, that same couple feet could be pullover space. It could be wider sidewalks. Could be green space, and it also, if it switches sides, that's what gives you the meandering, the chicanes. So it's sort of like a little puzzle to fit all these things together.
I had a few questions. One, Justin, you mentioned the shuttle service from the Winter Hill School to the Edgerly. That sounds like a pretty new development. I'm just curious, kind of what conversations brought you to that. I mean, I'm obviously supportive of it, but yeah, just curious the decision-making process, and then also like who was actually operating those shuttles.
Anyone else on the team? No, I'm sorry. I honestly don't know. I know it did not start at the beginning of the school year, but that it was a request because folks could just go to the place they're used to going. So I don't think it's like a continuous shuttle. I think it's like if you get to the old, Medford Street and Sycamore at a certain time of day, then there's a shuttle that'll bring you directly to the school. You know, I think in the first couple of weeks of school, I do daycare drop off on Cross Street. It was pretty hectic, right? It's already hectic from east, so when folks aren't used to going to a new location, they might choose to drive. So there was a good number of cars, so I think it was just another option. I believe it was sort of requested by the school community to try and figure out. I don't know who's currently operating it though.
Yeah, Justin, all I would add is that it's like, it is a school bus shuttle.
It is a school bus, okay.
Cool, that's super helpful. And then just in terms of Tough Street itself, you know, walking down there, I think the biggest thing I was struck by was just like how harrowing it feels to walk on the sidewalks. Like it feels like there's just obstacle after obstacle right now, where it's like there's a tree that's growing roots and making the, you know, pavement pop up off of the ground, or, you know, broken concrete everywhere that's next to like a really unattractive fence that has more gravel in it. And, you know, then if you're walking, you know, southbound, then, you know, you get kind of spat out on one of the, you know, most dangerous streets in the city, you know, across an intersection where like there's barely a crosswalk whatsoever. So I'm just very excited that there are improvements coming to this area. I think the thing that I would be most supportive of is just widening the sidewalks. Like right now, especially on what is it, the side of the street that has the gym on it. Those sidewalks are just extremely narrow and in horrible shape, and especially when you get closest to Cross Street with those kind of imposing facades, like it just feels it feels really difficult and unwelcoming to walk there. So I would just love to see the sidewalks widened. I personally like the mid-block moments concept, although I seem to be in the minority with that opinion. But I think it provides a really cool like boulevard type feeling. And then I guess I'll finish my comment with a question. So I know Washington Street, that intersection and that crosswalk is a separate project that's being run by the MBTA. But my understanding is also that has been in the works for a fairly long time. So I'm curious if like I can be reminded of the timeline of that, and also like whether we're confident that it will be finished on the timeline that we are currently operating under.
It was or sorry, go ahead, Kate. I think you might have more info than me, potentially.
No, I appreciate your patience. We appreciate everyone's patience in this. We've been urging the MBTA quite extensively on completing this work. We are getting a little bit more confident that it is moving forward, and we hope to have more substantial news at the next public meeting. So I know it's not a super satisfying answer at this time, but it's something that we are really pushing them on to complete as they had promised to. But as soon as we have more updated information, because we know this is a huge interest of a lot of folks following this project, is that we aim to update the project website and not only share at the public meeting, but to kind of respond back into like 311 requests we've gotten, you know, talk to folks on the street to really kind of reiterate what is coming.
And then one more question. So Justin, you mentioned like pick up, drop off at the schools in the area being pretty hectic at the start of the school year. I'm just curious if, I mean, one, if you're as a department like collecting any data on like mobility patterns around the schools right now, and if so, or even just anecdotally, if you're noticing any preferences. You kind of mentioned like more people driving since they're not familiar with the area, but curious for a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I apologize I didn't ask these questions to Greg beforehand. I think, one thing we have is a subscription to Streetlight now, which is cell phone data. So September's always crazy, right? But we can look at and see how much crazier is it than last year or the year before. It is, it's a whole new school community on Cross Street. So there's definitely more people using it of all modes of transportation. I'm on Cross Street every morning, and it's incredible, the pedestrian traffic as well. So not just the cars, but the bikes and the pedestrian traffic too. But we can look into that. I would expect that they're looking at the shuttle and how many folks are using that option as well.
And I can
Um,
jump in. I know Greg's been down there doing observations and members of parking committee. There's been PCOs out there helping to just like reinforce the pickup drop-off zones. And we've worked with the schools on getting drone footage of what pickup drop-off looks like at a couple different schools around the city. And we're able to actually like rewatch that and understand like how people are acting in these pickup drop-off areas, which has been really helpful for us to pick up on trends. And so like the sort of 10 minutes of craziness at the Bell, where people want to be picking up and dropping off, how the shuttle buses are interacting with the cars. And so I don't know if any of us can speak to like what the trends are necessarily, but the task force is collecting that data and will be sharing some of those trends with us. So maybe next time we can share back.
and anecdotally, even if there are more cars with the amount of traffic calming we've built on Cross Street and Pearl Street, you have to go slow, which is pretty great, even if there is more traffic.
Others, comments, questions, Tough Street, surrounding area.
For Tough Street and the intersection with Tough Street and Cross Street, you guys have any idea what you want to do with that intersection? It looks like the grades are kind of strange there, but there's the possibility maybe to have some green space or a big reduction of width the entrance.
So right now, no, we do not have a specific idea of what we're going to do with it, but we're really excited that the intersection of Tufts and Cross is in the scope of this project. And so it's been fun. I mean, I'm speaking a little bit more to the specific feedback we've gotten over the last couple of weeks. There's definitely a lot of interest, and especially now with the community path being open, feeling like they're like making it easier to connect there, connect across Cross to get, and so we're kind of looking at what are our different options because it starts to approach the bridge, or Cross Street approaches the bridge. We don't know what that will impact yet. And so that's what we're going to be working with our consultants in the engineering division to understand what are the options. But we're definitely getting a lot of feedback around a desire to make it a lot safer to cross and inviting.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add is just how unique of an opportunity this is, because this is a neighbor way and we're reconstructing it, which is not, just the way our resurfacing program works. It's not neighborways are very, much less likely to come up for like full street reconstruction. So it's a really unique opportunity. It's such a short street, but it connects the community path. It connects to the new GLX station into East Somerville. And as you mentioned, Alessandra, the sidewalks are incredibly narrow and in terrible shape. So it's a really, really cool opportunity to have like an awesome sort of gateway from East Somerville, into the East Somerville station, which is actually not in East Somerville technically. So if you haven't already, like really, really encourage you to review the slides and please give us feedback, come to the second community meeting.
And maybe if I could just offer one more thing too, if that's okay. With this partnership or the project with Neighbor Waste Design and Culture House, our team is obviously focused a lot on the reconstruction of Tough Street, but with the quick build opportunities in that Neighbor Ways project and Neighbor Ways and Culture House's background and looking at like more creative ways to make the space feel safer for folks walking, rolling, and biking. There's opportunities for more street art or just like design in a different way. And so it's very exciting too to see what are our options and you know, especially because now that we have the bicycle network plan out, we're really excited to kind of showcase these as some of our like first Neighbor Ways under that, and get more buy-in for that type of street.
I think both options look like massive improvements, so I'm very excited either way. Cool, great to see the city continue to move in this direction.
Cool. I'm not seeing a ton more activity. So last chance for contributing. Also, Suzanne, if you want to say anything about Tough Street, please raise your hand and I'm happy to unmute you. So I'll pause and see if anybody else wants to make comments before we end early. Okay, beautiful. Then thank you everyone for coming to yet another PTAC meeting. And we will see you hopefully at one of our events in October, whether it's Summer Streets or the Glen Street Neighbor Way Walk, or just our next meeting. So thanks everyone.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone.